Hey, for today's video, I wanted to mix things up a bit. Instead of the sport's infancy, I want to take a more recent look at CFB history. Today's topic checks a lot of boxes that I enjoy researching about college football. You have a directional Florida school, a coach who was supposed to be the next big thing, and the most unpredictable year in college football history, the 2007 season. Today's video subject is Jim Leavitt at USF. Jim Leavitt grew up in South Petersburg, Florida, and was a star quarterback in high school. He would go on to switch positions and play safety at Missouri before starting his coaching career there as a GA. He would bounce between small schools before he interned at Iowa 10 years after he started coaching, and eventually ended up at Kansas State as the linebackers coach. In 1991, he added co-defensive coordinator to his duties along with the other co-DC, Bob Stoops. With this brain trust in charge of the defense, it shifted its identity of the entire Kansas State team. They went from a generic, almost nondescript football team to a team you knew was always going to have a tough, gritty, nasty defense. In their first season, the team went 7-4 and had 2 shutouts. Also being the linebacker coach, Leavitt coached an emerging linebacker by the name of Brent Venables. The 1993 squad finished 9-2-1 and won their first bowl game in team history. Leavitt produced another rather famous linebacker, current Texas Tech AD Kirby Hocutt. In 1995, the Wildcats went 10-2 and old Jimmy Boy produced his most prestigious player in Hall of Fame linebacker Mark Semino. On December 12, 1995, Leavitt took the role as the inaugural head football coach for upstart South Florida. This allowed him to move back to Southern Florida where he grew up and would undoubtedly give him an advantage when it came to recruiting. Leavitt and his staff actually worked out of trailers on campus in the infancy of the program. The Bulls started out as an independent at the FCS level and went a respectable 5-6 for their first year. Western Kentucky beat them 31-3 that year, but there's an interesting tie between the two teams. The star quarterback for the Hilltoppers that year was Willie Taggart. Taggart would go on to be the head coach at USF and would actually bring Leavitt onto his staff at his stops at Oregon, Florida State, and FAU. The Bulls improved to 8-3 in just their second year, ever. This was the first of 6 straight winning seasons for the Bulls, and that is really incredible. A team in the modern era has 6 winning seasons in their first 7 seasons in existence. I do feel that I need to touch on the 2001 Bulls as this was the first year that they played an FBS schedule. In their 5th year on the field, they took the leap from FCS to FBS and actually went 8-3. They had wins over programs such as Pittsburgh, Houston, and Utah State, and close losses to Northern Illinois and Memphis. They could have very easily went 10-1 in their first year with the big boys. The following year, they went 9-2, and one of those losses was a respectable 31-14 loss to number 2 Oklahoma in Norman. The Bulls, however, did not get to go bowling after their incredible year in a surprising turn of events. Don't worry, we're getting to the magical 2007 season. But in 2005, the Bulls went 6-5. And that was a strange season as they lost a relatively close opener to Penn State 23-13. But 3 weeks later, they beat number 9 Louisville 45-14.
Julvis under center, the give to Hall, touchdown Bulls!
In that game, they flexed their defensive muscle, continuously causing turnovers, and the offense capitalizing on each one. This was by far the biggest win in school history to this point, and it was a taste of things to come for the Bulls. I also wanted to mention that this was their first year in the Big East, which was home to many of the current powers in other conferences, so I think gaining inclusion in that conference was a win in and of itself. 2006 was an improvement over the previous year as the team went 9-4 with wins over North Carolina, Pittsburgh, and Syracuse. Louisville got their revenge with a 31-8 drubbing of the Bulls, but USF would travel to Morgantown the next week and knock off number 7 West Virginia 24-19. Okay, we've made it. The 2007 college football season. It didn't start out spectacularly for USF as they beat FCS opponent Elon 28-13, and the next week they had to make the drive to the Plains to play number 17 Auburn. And that's exactly what they did. Not only did they make the drive, but they played Auburn. Even though they missed 4 field goals throughout the game, the Bulls managed to send the game into overtime, and after Auburn had to settle for a field goal, Jesse Hester Jr. caught the game-winning touchdown in the extra frame to give USF the unexpected 26-23 victory. After this showing, they entered the rankings for the first time in program history, cracking the AP rankings at 23rd and the coaches poll at 24th. Next up came a game against North Carolina. A lot of people thought that the Bulls would get caught looking forward to the next week's game against West Virginia and the magical season would be cut short. However, USF put together a complete game and put up 37 points against the Heels, and defensively, they allowed less than 180 total yards and gave up their only touchdown in the final minute of the game with their second string defense on the field. The stage was set. West Virginia, averaging over 47 points per game, would travel to Tampa to take on the Bulls defense, who was allowing just over 15 points per game. 67,000 people packed Raymond James Stadium to make it the largest home attendance for a USF football game.
15 to 35, but the turnovers have been killers. White, he turns it over, intercepted, and it'll be a touchdown. Ben Moffitt.
Linebacker Ben Moffitt opened up the scoring with a pick six, and the Bulls would never relinquish that lead. They held the high-powered Mountaineer offense scoreless until the final quarter. They had just beaten the number 5 team in the country and were ready for stardom. The team rocketed up the rankings, going from 18 to 6. 2 weeks later, they would decimate UCF 64-12. Knott's running back Kevin Smith led the nation with 172 yards per game, but he was held to a pedantic 55 yards by the suffocating Bulls defense. With LSU and Cal losing their games, this paved the way for USF to make an unprecedented move. Jim Leavitt had literally built this program from newborn to the second best team in the nation in just 11 years. But if you know anything about the 2007 season, you know that number 2 spot you absolutely did not want. The Bulls were in the cursed position, but just like the whole season up to that point, they were determined to change the narrative around their team. The Knots had to travel up to New Jersey and play Rutgers, and in front of 44,000 people, the Scarlet Knots used Ray Ross's 181 rush yards and Taquan Underwood's 114 yards and 2 touchdowns receiving to upset the Bulls 30-27. And with this single loss, the chances that USF will make it to the BCS title game vanished. Being a smaller school, it was absolutely unheard of that they would even make it to number 2. And now that they've lost, and especially to a team who wasn't number 1, they had no chance of going all the way. Still, there were 5 games left to play. It appeared though that the team maybe hadn't recovered mentally from the previous game, and they were upset for the second week in a row when they lost 22-15 to UConn. The following week, they played Cincinnati and actually scored twice before the offense even took the field. But the defense gave up 31 points in the very first quarter. The Bulls had a chance late to win it, but the referees seemed to miss a defensive pass interference, and it was game over. It was time to finish the season strong, and that's exactly what USF did. They dismantled Syracuse 41-10 to get back in the win column, and Louisville 55-17 the next week. The season finale saw the Bulls defeat Pittsburgh 48-37, and they finished the season 9-3. They drew Oregon in the Sun Bowl. And this game started out sloppy with a slew of penalties for both teams, and USF trailed 18-14 at half. But the Ducks absolutely exploded in the second half and ended up winning 56-21 behind 353 rush yards. The year that had started with an absolutely magical run of games was really ruined by the 3-game skid, and I feel like once the momentum had turned against them in the bowl game, they weren't really interested in trying to fight back out of it. 2008 was a rather pedestrian season for the Bulls as they went 8-5, but they did have a notable 37-34 victory over number 13 Kansas. This is back when Kansas was good. 2009 was another 8-5 season with wins over number 18 Florida State and number 20 West Virginia. They defeated Northern Illinois in the International Bowl, which was played at Rogers Center in Toronto. That's a cool little tidbit. This team also featured a freshman quarterback named BJ Daniels and a DN that simply goes by 3 letters. JPP. Not to mention George Selvey, who I think was a really good player in college and showed spurts in the NFL, but just can never stick with the team. And this is the last season Jim Leavitt would coach at USF, as on January 8th, 2010, Leavitt was fired after an investigation found that he had assaulted a player in the locker room during halftime of the previous year's Louisville game. And not only that, but Leavitt allegedly interfered in the investigation, instructing players and coaches to change their stories to paint him as an innocent man. Although stories have come out since the incident took place that have sort of contradicted that narrative, either from coaches or players, with a coach who was on staff at the time saying that the incident allegedly took place 2 feet from the locker he was at the time and he didn't see or hear anything. The father of the player allegedly assaulted also told media after the incident that Leavitt never struck his son, but rather grabbed him by the shoulder pads in an attempt to motivate the young man. Either way, it's a sad ending to a great tenure. Leavitt finished 97-57 and had a bowl record of 3-2. He had 2 losing seasons in 13 years and did not have a losing season in 5 years in the Big East Conference, which was a good mixture of ranked powerhouses and really talented up-and-coming teams, USF being a prime example of such. You also can't get over the fact that he had South Florida primed to play in the national championship in 2007 before things took a mid-season turn. It makes you wonder, what would the history of South Florida look like if Leavitt never left? I'm sure at some point he probably would have left to take a higher profile job, but how many more years would he have gone on producing like he did on the field? Would CFB's perception of USF be any different than it is today? I know Leavitt has been considered for some head coaching vacancies, most notably being a candidate to replace his mentor Bill Snyder at K-State, but he's not landed anywhere as the lead man since USF. I think he's going to have at least one more chance before his career comes to an end. I mean, people still consider Art Briles for openings, and what he was a part of is obviously far worse than what may or may not have happened with Jim Leavitt. He continues to be a sought-after DC in college football, and earlier this year he switched from FAU to join Sonny Dykes at SMU. So that will be an interesting storyline to follow. As for USF, they've had 5 winning seasons in 11 years since Leavitt's firing, most of which came under Willie Taggart. But until we have another magical season like 2007, we'll have to keep watching retrospectives like this to see what widespread competitive college football looks like.